Hey everybody, Tony from Unskippable Cutscene here. Today I'm going to be kicking off a new mini-series where we'll be looking at each of the new specs and how they're going to be fitting into the upcoming End of Dragons meta. I'll go in reverse order from the official spec reveals just to show our adventurer remains some love. That means today's all about the new Engineer Elite specialization, the Mechanist. For those of you wondering where these numbers are coming from, I've pulled them from the wiki, which is more or less accurate as of the 4th beta weekend. I'll be assessing the amount of access each class has to each boon, condition, and control effect. I'm going to say that again, I'm looking at access to the effect, ignoring cooldowns because certain classes like Vindicator and Bladesworn rely heavily on class mechanics to determine actual skill usage limitations. This won't be a measure of DPS, but should help us identify what each spec was designed for. The Guild Wars 2 PvE endgame pretty much boils down to applying buffs to your party while DPSing a single target. This is the case for fractal bosses, strike missions, raids, and open world meta events. For this reason, we'll be comparing boon application in the context of the maximum number of targets and condition application against a single target such as a boss. So let's dive right in. Starting off, we've got the Mechanist's average damage skill power coefficient coming in at 90% of the spec with the highest coefficient. Again, this isn't an indication of DPS per se, but rather how weighted the class is towards strike damage compared to the other End of Dragons specs. 90% is pretty good, as we're going to see in the next installments of this mini-series. Now, let's start with the purely offensive boons. The Mechanist is at the front of the pack when it comes to accessing Fury and Might. The Barrier Burst ability is a majority contributor to this access. Mechanist is pretty low tier when it comes to defensive boon access. Out of the End of Dragon specs, Mechanist isn't the best at applying Aegis or protection, but it can definitely be a secondary source of it in a party. Access to regeneration is pretty slim, though there is a short cooldown on the mace ability that provides it, and there's absolutely no access to resolution. Moving on to our mobility boons, we see pretty decent party stability with Crisis Zone, and Barrier Burst does the heavy lifting once more to provide by far the most single skill vigor access of all of the End of Dragon specs. Finally, we've got the utility boons. Mechanist has good access to Alacrity through channeling Circuit's Grandmaster trait, but the boon is still not quite as available as it is to the Spectre. Before I dive into the condition access, don't forget to like and subscribe to be notified about each release in this mini-series. Moving on, we've got our single target offensive conditions, with 100% being the EOD class with the greatest access. As we can see here, Mechanist is that class for Burning and Confusion. We'll see other classes with better access to Bleed, but Mechanist can still contribute decently there. Poison and Torment, on the other hand, are just not accessible with the Mechanist features as they are. Finally, we can see that the Mechanist is a bit on the lower end of vulnerability application. Keeping in mind we're ignoring any interactions with other engineered trait lines. Next, we've got our soft control conditions. We can see that Mechanist has moderate access to Cripple, Slow, and Weakness, but it's really not the best at any of them. Blinded, Chilled, and Immobilize are all completely inaccessible as well. Finally, we've got the hard control. One thing we're going to see throughout this mini-series is that Taunt and Fear are pretty much non-existent across the board in End of Dragons. Daze and Stun access are pretty slim, and in my opinion, Knockback and Launch are always way more fun to see in-game anyways, and Mechanist has the best access out of all the End of Dragon specs to those features. Overall, Mechanist is pretty balanced between skill power coefficients and condition access. In a group setting, they'll absolutely be able to fill a damage or boon plus barrier support role. The Mechanist does suffer somewhat in the arena of both hard and soft control effects though. What spec are you most excited to try in End of Dragons? Join in the discussion below, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and a subscribe before you go. Our next video will be on the Spectre, and I hope to see you again soon.